work for recovery, and in this case that species is not listed, although we had a listing petition. It was not listed, and the locals sort of took it as a challenge. Like, those damn people from the Center for Biological Diversity think they're going to list our toad. We're going to save our toad. We'll show them. So they've been saving their toad. It's a very interesting thing. Small populations, declining habitats. And the work that we do at the center, we're very focused on habitats. And this is Mill Creek, which flows into the Santa Ana. This is where the Santa Ana sucker and some other species used to live. They're really mostly not there now, but trying to recover these ecosystems tends to be what we see as the real basis, and I think other people have said that today. The Federal Endangered Species Act, there's sort of several sections of it that are important. Listing, of course, being the most important if you're going to gain protection under the Federal Act. Critical habitat, having it designated, making sure it's protected. Section 9 are the take prohibitions, and Section 10 provides permitting both for research and for habitat conservation plans, which are used mostly as an offset to development on a larger scale. And Section 7 are the consultation requirements when there's a federal nexus, a federal agency approval is involved in an action. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but I just wanted to kind of flag for people what the structure of the act. Listing is the keystone of the Endangered Species Act. This is the condor, of course, people have talked a little bit about today. And one of the things I would say about the condor, which is, I think, a very small population, is that we're seeing new threats. And so right now we're looking at the expansion of wind energy, which of course most of us really want to see because it's a renewable energy. But we're also seeing expansion of the condor's range in California, as well as in the 10J population, and there will be a collision between the two. And Fish and Wildlife has said that very clearly, DFG has said it very clearly, and yet we don't know what to do. It is, I would say, causing paralysis on some level among both conservationists and the agencies, as well as the wind industry. So it's an interesting issue. The ESA, again, back to my theme of ecosystem-based conservation, and that really is the basis of the structure of the ESA, and hopefully it works most of the time. So again, my same thesis again, early identification of declining species and using science-based conservation measures to conserve their habitat and ecosystem basis. So this is the Coachella Valley French toad lizard, obviously not my photograph. And it lives in dune habitats in the Coachella Valley area. But this is a preserve area of dunes, and right next to it you have a very large golf course. So this is the sort of patchiness and fragmentation that we're dealing with in reality. Nonetheless, we're happy to have it because it's being conserved, but it is, it's a little tricky. The ESA works. That's part of my theme. I think other people have sort of flagged that this morning. Our speaker flagged it wherever he went. I don't know. And species that have critical habitat are twice as likely to recover. Species that have recovery plans are more likely to stabilize and recover. Very few species have gone extinct after they were listed. And the longer a species is listed, the more likely it is to be recovering. This is the yellow-legged frog, which we saw already today once, the mountain yellow-legged frog. And this just, too many words, it's like all, PowerPoint, you're never supposed to do that, so I did it. And, recently, just last 2 weeks ago, the California Fish and Game Commission did vote to list the yellow-legged frog, mountain yellow-legged frog populations, the Sierra, which I always say wrong, the one in the Sierra Nevada, as threatened, and the Reina viscosa as endangered. And so we've been waiting for a federal listing for almost a decade, and now we have at least a state listing, which we feel is very, very important for this species. This is the Yosemite toad, harder to see in that photo. We're still waiting for a listing for that species. Also, the threats there are increasing. Possibly global warming as well is going to increase the threats to both of those species as well as others. Critical habitat designation. This is an area in the Sespe Creek in Southern California that is designated critical habitat for the arroyo toad. And at the critical habitat stage is really the only stage in that listing process where the economics can be taken into account lawfully. And there's been a lot of case law about that, going back and forth. What can you count? What can't you count? And then also looking at how do you monetize the value of preserving habitats. Particularly, for example, here, when you have a riparian area, you're also having clean water effects, etc. So it may be saving the arroyo toad. It may also save several fish species. I believe there's also red-legged frogs in the area, not right in this stretch. And clean water. What is the value of clean water? These things are very difficult to monetize, and on the other side you have people with private lands or who wanted to take more water out of the stream saying, I can tell you exactly how much it's costing me. So the economic question, I think, can get very interesting, and a lot more work to be done in that area. This is the green sturgeon, which is a listed species, and I think it actually is a fairly small population. I think it's not known, the complete numbers. But then the reason I put this in is because there was a really awful incident a few years ago where 10 adults were killed when these dam gates were closed, and they were being closed at a different time of year than they had been before. And it never really occurred to them at that time that it was going to affect this species. And so if there was critical habitat in place, possibly that would have been flagged for them. I don't know, but it is one of the questions that we have. This is the endangered Buena Vista lake shrew. I worked on this species. There's a critical habitat designation with lots of little bits throughout the Lake Buena Vista used to be in sort of the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley. It was a giant shallow lake that's now disappeared. And we did challenge this critical habitat listing as too small, and they are going back again, and during the time that they're going back, they found some new populations. So just having that research out there really helps, because maybe you find things you didn't know were there. So, and that's a snowy plover. And now this one, this slide is talking about other laws, and there are a lot of other laws that can be used to help protect species. NEPA, which is the Environmental Review, the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, Migratory Bird Treaty Act, all of these laws, even the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act, can be useful. But on some level, it really is on-the-ground management and the kind of compromises people were talking about before that are going to determine whether we can preserve a species like this, which nests right on the beaches, and so very vulnerable to people bringing dogs on the beach, to off-road vehicles on the beach, etc. There's a lot of California laws that protect species, and under California law, it's more of a hodgepodge of laws. It's not so straightforward. This is the Orcas woody aster that's a sensitive species, I believe, under California law. California laws, we have our own Endangered Species Act, we have the fully protected species portions of the Fish and Game Act, we have several, the Natural Communities Conservation Planning, which is a little bit like the HCP framework, where you do a larger plan for an ecosystem. And then we have a bunch of acts that protect plants. We have our own California Environmental Quality Act. We have our own water code that is stronger in many ways than the national water statutes, etc. So there's a lot out there that you can use depending on the situation, and you kind of have to know what it affects on the ground if you're trying to see how the laws interface with the population you're trying to conserve. So this I did a few years ago, and I think I'll sort of breeze through it a little bit, but we have a lot of listed plants and a lot of listed animals in California. There's some overlap between the California and the federal listings, but there are also ways that they don't overlap. This is Munce's onion, has a very specific kind of habitat in Southern California, very susceptible to development pressures. These are the San Joaquin kit fox, which obviously not my photo, really cute. There's been actually quite a bit of study on the kit fox, and I think it's a tricky species because it's a canid, and so they are adaptable in many ways, but they also have a lot of competition pressures, and there's a lot of things in their habitats like rodenticides that make them very vulnerable. So there was a study done a few years ago that showed, they were just using modeling, but showed really an extinction curve of something like 24 years. But I think now we're about 5 years into that, and I don't know what the results are. This is the golden eagle, which is a fully protected species in California. And California has a somewhat quirky law called the Fully Protected Species Act. It has some people have said somewhat random list of species that are covered under this act. But if a species is covered under this act, basically no take of the species is lawful in California. That was recently changed. There was an amendment that now says that if you have an NCCP, which is a larger planning document that allows take usually of a suite of species, but at the same time is protecting an entire ecosystem or habitat type, then you can have some take of the golden eagle. And the golden eagle, again, is one where wind projects right now are very much new and increasing threat to them. This is the Sierra Nevada bighorn sheep, which during the time I worked on it changed somewhat because now it was determined to be genetically separated from the other bighorn. And this does have critical habitat, and I worked on that lawsuit to make sure that we got the critical habitat. It's over 400,000 acres. There's been a ton of money, a ton of work done on this species. I'm sure some of you in the room have even worked on it. And I think that the results have paid off. I mean, the species has increased quite a lot. It's taken a lot of predator control, as well as we've been working to limit grazing by domestic sheep because there's a disease transmission issue there. So it's a very, I think it's a good example of what can be done, but I believe quite a lot of money and time has been spent on this species. These are two vernal pool plants in Southern California, and vernal pools, again, are one of these vulnerable habitats, especially to development pressures. You can see it's a nice flat area. You can only see the pools during certain times of year, and this is both in Southern California, and I know actually on the north coast in Sonoma County, quite a lot of issues with this, and I think some parts of the Central Valley as well. So when I was thinking about this conference, I was thinking a lot about rarity also, because a lot of the species I work on are naturally rare. They either are in the Great Basin, where we have a very high level of endemism, or they're on something like this, a dunes ecosystem, where they tend to be isolated, and so they've developed in these different ways. And this is the Algodones Dunes in Southern California. It's the largest dune system in the United States, I believe. And this is a beautiful picture. It's home to a whole suite of rare invertebrates, as well as the Pearson's milkvetch and some other plants that are quite rare. But it is also a public lands that is used for off-road vehicle, a very high level of off-road vehicle use. And as you can see, plants are not going to be able to survive in this kind of atmosphere. We did have a case on this issue, and they haven't actually yet. We won a case saying that they hadn't adequately addressed the issues in their critical habitat determination, and they had to go back and redo also their land use management plan, and they did redo the critical habitat, actually making it smaller. However, the analysis that they did for making it smaller was better, and so the court said, well, that's okay, because now they gave a better reason for making the small critical habitat. So as you can see, the law can be a little bit frustrating. It's a very blunt tool. That's the Pearson's milkvetch and the new critical habitat. And then I'm just going to run through these very quickly. These are just some more species. Wetlands and riparian areas are something I've also tried to focus on because as an ecosystem, they just provide so much more bang for your buck, so to speak. There's a real synergy there with a lot of species, as the southwestern willow flycatcher and the pika, high elevation species that obviously is threatened by climate change. And I think the next few slides are all climate change related. We have the Hawaiian monk seal, which the critical habitat that it had is being now below sea level, and so they're trying to look at moving that critical habitat to other islands as well. This is the hidden lake blue curls, which is threatened under the ESA. It really just is in this one high mountain lake in one area in Southern California, and with climate change, there's probably not much that can be done. But it is, you know, interesting question. When we were talking about where do you put your efforts and your money, and that's the little blue curls there. So that's, I did it. Thank you.